Prime Minister Scott Morrison has defended his decision to scrap a $90 billion submarine contract with France, declaring it is in the national interest. It comes as Paris recalled its ambassadors to Australia and the US in an unprecedented move. As part of the new AUKUS agreement, the government will instead buy at least 8 nuclear-powered submarines. The deal means Australia will become just the 7th nation in the world to operate nuclear-powered subs. And joining us live now from Paris is Bruno Tertrais, the Deputy Director of the Foundation for Strategic Research. Bruno, appreciate your time this morning. Good evening, your time. Can I start by asking, what is the view from Paris of Canberra this morning?
Actually, most of the French attention is focused on Washington. Not that the subcontract did not matter, not at all the case, but really, I guess that most of the anger and bitterness and resentment is directed at least as much as towards Washington than towards Canberra. Regarding the French-Australian relations, there is now the feeling of having been, quote, lied to, unquote. And I know that Prime Minister Morrison has defended his position, and this has been reported in the French press. Actually, we gave the French the warning sign, etc. And the French interpretation, to say the least, is very different. So a lot of anger and bitterness also directed at Canberra.
You might have just heard in the previous story, Bruno, that the Prime Minister had concerns that the capability of the attack-class submarines no longer met the strategic interests of Australia, so it moved on to the nuclear-powered subs. Isn't that fair enough?
It's actually a very fair point. I mean, from a purely strategic standpoint, I, as an analyst, I can understand Australia's concern and the evolution of Australian operational needs. However, 2 points. First of all, the Australian side never discussed the hypothesis of nuclear power with the French. And most importantly, we were already committed to a contract which could have been broken. Of course, that's part of any contract. But however, once again, what changed is that we were not told about this so-called Plan B, which began to be discussed apparently more than 6 months ago. So I, as an expert, I can understand the change in the operational need, even though, once again, as an observer, I can only note that I think Australia won't get any of these subs of its own before at least 20 years. And I think that if Australia, embark in a lease of US submarines, which from my standpoint is the most likely option, then you may have given up sovereignty, some of your sovereignty to the benefit of your operational needs, which is a choice that I can respect. And of course, there's another dimension to all this, which the French tend to overlook a little bit, is that there's a breadth of technical and operational cooperation, from interoperability to AI, which is, I believe, as important as the submarine part. And sometimes the French tend to forget that in their own discussions.
Bruno, do you accept that Naval Group made mistakes, that there were these massive cost blowouts and the time delays as well that contributed to this decision?
Oh, I certainly can accept the idea that there were serious problems in the execution of the contract. This was public knowledge, and I can personally testify to the fact that 6 months ago, even though I had no part in the industrial aspect of things, but 6 months ago, I know for a fact that Naval Group was worried and concerned about how to best take this thing forward, and that this was so I will never say that Naval Group and the French never made any mistakes. I know they probably did, or they may have done so, but I can't comment any further on the nitty-gritties or the technicalities of the execution of the contract, which I was not privy to.
Sure. Okay, we've heard some pretty strong language over the weekend, particularly from France's foreign minister, who claims that France has been stabbed in the back. Do you believe that this may well lead to trade repercussions for Australia as a next step?
It's possible, though not certain. Can I just testify to the fact that, having spoken at length with many French officials, I can personally testify to the fact that the anger and bitterness is really there, and it's not fake. It's not political theater. Now, I'm sure there will be talk of possible repercussions on the French position towards the EU-Australia deal. I'm not sure it will go that far. I think personally it would be a mistake, and I would not advise my government to go down that route, especially since I'm not sure that our EU partners would agree. And you know, we are all in the same boat, so to say, in the same submarine. We have to, we do have to engage in those privileged links also to counter China. And that's a concern, and that's an interest, a common interest that will remain a common one to Australia, France, and the rest of Europe.
What does this decision mean for France's China strategy now, Bruno?
Oh, don't expect the French to change tacks and now begin cozying up to China. No, that won't happen. This may affect our relation with Washington, probably with Canberra too, to London to some extent, but we've given up on the Brits, so to say. But I think what the French will do in the Indo-Pacific, because we are present in the Indo-Pacific, as you know well, we are also your neighbors, Australia's neighbors, will probably try to rely more on other friends and partners such as India or Japan or maybe others. But we really have to start from scratch, restart from scratch, so to say, our Indo-Pac strategy, and we'll probably rely more on Japan and maybe Germany also to some extent. But we won't snub Australia. Australia is there, and we will still need Australia, and maybe Australia still needs us too.
How does Australia get its relationship with France back on track now?
Well, first of all, I think there needs to be a cooling down, a period of cooling down period. We can't really. There's no point of doing anything right now. We have to quietly rebuild our relationship on different on various levels. My personal recommendation is that it should also be based with quiet discussions at the experts and non-official level to see what we can salvage from these 10 years of intense building a strategic relationship. I don't think everything is lost. The submarine contract is lost, but maybe not everything. And then patiently rebuild something, but it's going to take years. And this will have to happen in parallel with the 18 months of discussion that Australia will have with this British and American partners. It will be a different track. Maybe, just maybe, France could be associated to some of these activities. I'm not sure yet, but it's way too early. It's way too early to do so. And one thing I'd like to comment on, that we're not going to empty Australian battles of wine in the streets as it happened when the French were testing nuclear weapons in the Pacific in the mid-90s, where Australia was emptying bottles of wine. That won't happen. Okay. It's not an emotional thing between France and Australia. It is between France and Washington.
Okay, really interesting. Bruno Tertrais, the Deputy Director of the Foundation for Strategic Research, live for us in Paris. Appreciate that, Bruno. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.